Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Jason Pansis. I'm a co-founder of Envision Blockchain Solutions. We're proud Microsoft partners and of course proud Enterprise Ethereum Alliance members, as well as certified by the Linux Foundation and Corda partners and Corda certified, all of which support actually the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance Token Taxonomy Initiative, which is a lot about what we're going to be discussing today. And in the event that you haven't seen my initial webinar covering the TTF, this is actually an update. And we'll get into that update here in the various details moving forward in just a little bit. Just a brief about us. Envision Blockchain, we are a full service consultancy and blockchain systems integrator. It's an interesting and unique position to have in this specific market, especially with respect to it being an emerging technology. We are not necessarily a SaaS company. We do custom development for enterprise organizations and offer an array of different services pertaining to blockchain, including different training services, workshops, and we of course leverage an array of different modern cloud solutions in order to help our custom development process. With that in mind, if we just take a look for a brief moment at the upper right of the training section, you'll note that we now have an Azure Blockchain Tokens and TTF workshop. And we can get into that in just a little bit. I think it'll make a little bit more sense. But before we really dive deep into Azure Blockchain Tokens and the TTF, let's first do a little housekeeping and backtrack, a little recap as to what the Token Taxonomy Initiative is and the fact that the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, a neutral party, which is a global member-driven organization, has initiated and has really made a nice impact amongst the enterprise community in helping drive standards. And just recently, this past month, November 4th, the Token Taxonomy Framework released news that they have a version 1.0. And we were fortunate enough to be part of this awesome article that covered the various global leaders unveiling this comprehensive token framework for these standard tokens, which we're going to get into here in just a little bit. And I'm not going to get into the verbiage on the screen, although, you know, for the sake of a brief overview, the real focus with the Token Taxonomy Framework is to enable the reuse of token templates across various different industries and to be able to define tokens through various different behaviors and analogies that different industry verticals can use. And we'll get into the creation of artifacts and how the actual taxonomy works. What is a token? Many individuals, when focusing on technology, leave the realm of where we actually exist today. And a token, if we really break it down, which is what the Token Taxonomy Initiative Token Taxonomy Framework really has done, is really defining what a token is. But first, let's understand it in the physical world. It can be a representation of, let's say, $1. It can be a representation of a check, a ticket, a lands deed, any sort of coin, so on and so forth. But it has specific qualities, behaviors, and provable value, right? It can be either physical or it could be digital. And for example, physical digital, we'll say an actual document versus a PDF. And when we talk about tokens, we have to just rationally understand that we can do different things with tokens. For example, you can take a $1 bill and you can transfer it to another individual. And that's a property, or rather that's a behavior that when you break down the logistics to understand tokens, that you need to keep in mind that not just in the digital world, but in the physical world, we deal with tokens on a daily basis. So let's get into some of the recent advancements and updates that were just announced in this TTF 1.0. just this past month, November 4th, right? In the behind scenes here, we see in kind of the white box that we originally looked at the token template as the definition. And then we had our token class and instances where we still have that, but we realized that when trying to create efficiencies within the taxonomy framework, we needed to find a way to reduce data duplication. And one way we found we can do that, and I say we, this initiative has really been led by Marley Gray, where hats off to him. He's done a tremendous amount of work in updating and providing a lot of clarity that drives this taxonomy. But realistically, what have we done? Well, the template is now realistically divided into not only just the formula, which we'll speak about, but also a definition. And that allows us to reuse the formula for various different definitions. Likewise, artifacts, such as a behavior, right? If transferable is a behavior artifact, we give that a specific reference and we specify what that artifact is so that we can also identify it moving forward within the taxonomy. So with that in mind, we begin building this hierarchy, as you can kind of see. And token bases, include subdivision settings, and of course a unique token is then added. So what we see here is a little bit of a difference between what was a token template and how that was initially defined from its base till today. And we'll get into those differences in more depth in just a moment. But just to take everybody's minds and put them at ease, let's first understand what we mean when we talk about these artifacts, because it sometimes seems like a very technical thing. But realistically, they're just files, right? We have a file of a base. This is the base of the token. And we'll get into how we can start defining the base of a token and its various different artifacts. So if we were to open the base folder, you'd begin to see the various different token bases, token base artifacts, and their associated files with their specifications and their unique identifiers associated. Likewise for behaviors and property sets. And then of course you have your token templates, where within that you'd have your token formulas, you'd have your token specification, and of course your token definition. So that's what these artifacts are all about. They're just files that have meaning, that have identifiers. So what changed? How did we reorganize? In the past is kind of in bold because we want to make sure that you realize that this is what was on the left, where we looked at the token base as fungible, non-fungible, and hybrid. Today, the token base realistically is broken down before fungible and non-fungible. We actually break it down into whether it's fractional or whole, because you can have non-fungible and fungible fractional tokens. Likewise, you can have whole fungible or singleton token bases. And the reason why this happened is we realized that we needed to reduce the amount of data or the data duplication that we were talking about just before. Additionally, we need to begin redefining the token base and how to properly classify it. So we spoke briefly before about the token template having a token formula, a token definition, and a specification. Well, within the specification, we need to make sure how a token is specifically classified. And when we take a look at the token unit, that was kind of, part of the root of the token base, whether it's fractional, whole, or singleton, before we take a look at the token type and determine whether or not it's going to be fungible or non-fungible. Where we said on the previous slide, you can have, you know, a fractional fungible token, right? That's perfectly fine, but we needed to reorder that. Next, we have the token value type, and this is kind of interesting. There's two different token value types, one which is intrinsic and one which is a reference. Intrinsic is a token that has value within itself. For example, if we take a look at cryptocurrencies can have intrinsic value, whereas opposed to a reference token, a reference value type would literally refer, this token would be a reference to a physical good or a physical asset in the physical world. So if you were to have, you know, an apple, or if you were to have a dollar bill, or if you were to have a painting or even a diamond, that can be represented as a token with, of course, various different other classifications and behavior properties, or rather artifacts attached to it. So the difference between intrinsic and reference is definitely a very important concept to understand with respect to value type. Likewise, we have a representation type, which is common versus unique. Common would be much like a bank account, all kind of on one ledger, and unique is obviously solo, where you don't need to keep that specific centralized type of ledger. And when I say ledger, I mean the accounting of that specific token. And then you, of course, have your template type as to whether or not it's a single or hybrid, or let's say a singleton or hybrid. Rather, let me take that back. A single would be a token where the template type doesn't have any sort of parent-child relation. So you can have a hybrid that would have a parent-child relation, where you can have a non-fungible token encumber or be a hybrid with multiple other different types of tokens that are underneath it. And that allows for us to have this hybrid template type. So a common example would be, let's say, a theater ticket where you have, you know, a specific date, time, venue, so on and so forth, would be the parent token, where the child relation and where the hybrid template type comes in would be the various different seating, which would of course have different costs associated, different monetary value associated with it, which obviously pertain directly to, you know, the physical world and how we can now begin classifying and representing these tokens. Moving forward, we now have redefined this new approach, and we briefly spoke about this new token template and how we can now look at it as a token template formula. We can take a look at the specification template and, of course, the definition template. And on the left, the formula template, we'll get into a little bit more detail here in just a moment, but it composes the taxonomy base that we just spoke about, the various different behavior artifacts, potential behavior groupings, and of course, property artifacts. On the far right, we have a definition template. And the definition template is exactly that. It allows us to define the business value or functionality that the various different behaviors can have through a series of analogies, dependencies, and we can begin, you know, using those identifiers to begin mapping those behavior artifacts to the token template, to the token definition template. And then, of course, from the previous screen, we began classifying tokens, and that's essentially where we add that into the specification template. So all three of these different templates combined really allow us to get a full picture of what today's token template is. which is of course a representation of some sort of business functionality potentially, whether it's reference or has some sort of intrinsic value is to be determined. Token behavior artifacts have come a long way since inception. As discussed, this month, November 4th, we had this version 1.0 release of the TTF, and since 17 different behaviors have come into the Token Taxonomy Framework. And when we talk about a token formula, we're talking again about the base, the behaviors, the potential behavior groups, and of course, property sets. And here we're going to take a look at just 3 behavior artifacts, transferable. And at the beginning of the presentation, we went into the concept of understanding tokens in the physical world, where if an individual has a $1 bill, they have the ability to transfer that $1 bill to another individual. That's a behavior property that tokens can also have. And that's what we call transferable as per the token taxonomy. Likewise, mintable and burnable. So for example, we all know that we can't mint US dollars, but there's a section of the government that can. We all know that we can't burn dollars, that's not illegal. And I don't believe that there's a section of the government that can, but that's another discussion. Regardless, between these 3 different behavior artifacts, we can see how we can begin defining this token formula. On this slide here, we wanted to, of course, just give you a brief understanding and picture as to how the taxonomy has now taken new form and new structure, where on this specific artifacts template, we're taking a look at the behavior artifact transferable. In the red boxes, we have the ID that's representing transferable. And then underneath you have tooling, where you have a small t to the right of it. And that T is the behavior artifact symbol, so that when we begin putting together a token formula, we don't have to spell out transferable, we can just use T as an example. And in moving forward, we have these token behavior groups, as we had just briefly mentioned, where we assume user roles. Where if you have mintable and burnable, well then by default, that means that an entity, someone, a person, a business, whatever the case may be, has the ability or the permissions to either mint or to burn a specific token or that specific I guess I wouldn't say token template, that specific token in that use case. So the mint and burn is of course a member role, it's a permission where that can be assigned or rather defined through the token definition template that we were talking about. And this token behavior group is an additional artifact, which is of course a grouping. Which sits to the right of the behaviors in the token formula, which we'll give a brief example over here. So when we take a look at this token formula, right under token formula, we see that the TF is a fungible token, which is not, it's not divisible, or it can't be, subdivided. It's not transferable. Or it is transferable, it's delegable, and the SC is this supply control, this behavior group that we just went through. And really the point of this here is that we're taking a look at these token definition templates. And what's very interesting about the redefined TTF is that you can have now a token definition template such as loyalty point and a token definition template such as a rewards token, which leverage the same token formula, but have obviously different definitions. And obviously the third box there, token definition template N, means that this can go on, and it's up to us as the enterprise adopters of this token taxonomy framework to begin and continue defining additional templates. So here we just take a look at a sample formula with different definition and specification. So we see the same exact formula that we just went through. And we each see in the red boxes that the same formula, the taxonomy formulas are identical, but they each have a similar specification, but of course a different definition. And we can get into that here in just a little bit. So when we talk about creating new artifacts, this is one of the most key and critical components in participating with the TTF, is that you can begin defining these token behaviors through analogies, where, for example, we saw on the previous screen that a rewards token is leveraging the same behavior artifacts, but are defined differently, and we can begin defining them through different analogies, which we can of course submit through various different tooling, which then reside in that GitHub repository that we showed on one of the initial screens to help explain artifacts. So token template definition identifiers, they now associate a new definition to maybe a pre-existing formula to create a new token template specification. So that's basically how we begin understanding how to start calling on this specific definition in order to reuse the same formulas. The final set of the token formula, and I see that there's just a couple questions. We'll make sure to set some time for a Q&A at the end of the call here. But the token properties, that's the final piece of this token formula. And, what we're going to talk about here is, whether or not these token properties have behavioral roles or non-behavioral roles. And we briefly grazed upon, a token property having a behavioral role, for example, like a supply control type situation, or a non-behavioral role, such as a skew, which we'll just kind of show you here in just a second. So what we're taking a look at here is, basically a behavior role, which allows us to assign a user role to, let's say, an individual or an entity that's drilling for oil, and of course allowing them to mint a barrel, which maybe later on that barrel goes to some sort of refinery where the barrel is then, the oil is cracked and refined into either, let's say, a heating oil derivative or let's say RBOB, or rather gasoline, for the sake of resale. Well, that token no longer has no longer exists as an oil barrel anymore. It's now whatever its new derivative or its new definition, I guess, as a token would be. A non-behavioral role would be something like a skew. And this is very interesting. So we have these barcodes. GS1 global standards put out a way for us to really begin understanding how to scale and begin leveraging various different barcodes, so that as businesses receive different inventory, we don't need all these different types of scanners with different types of programming to understand the various different barcode methodologies that could theoretically exist. Just like these token templates are creating standards, GS1 or the global standards for barcodes also exist. And this is an example of a non-behavioral property set. So now that we kind of understand, the overall basis of, what a token really is relative to the physical world, relative to the digital world, and now into the token digital world, and how we've now begun to structure through this hierarchical framework called the token taxonomy. Here's just a few different token specifications that the EEA has put together. And recently, Envision Blockchain, alongside of Microsoft, Intel, Consensus, iExec, and Kaleido, have had the chance to really work on defining and building out, which we recently demonstrated at the DevCon 5 in Osaka in October. So that's where these three token templates specifically came from. So one of the benefits of the Token Taxonomy Framework, aside from the fact that we're now delivering global standards for tokens, which will allow us to deploy tokens on in various different instances or different ledgers, instead of having thousands of different tokens, just like you could theoretically have thousands of different types of barcodes, where how can we really run a business in that capacity? Well, we needed to create a form of user experience. And these are some of the tools that enable this user experience. For example, the taxonomy client, the taxonomy printer, the taxonomy service. This is all released during the TTF 1.0 publication, which, as mentioned, came out on the 4th of November 2019, just this month. And these are all functions through a token object module, which leverages gRPC. Not to get too technical, but for those who are interested in more of a graphical user interface, we have now this TTF UI to allow this drag and drop token designer, so that we can begin, as we begin workshopping and we begin talking about business and the various different functions that your business use case deals with the various different users or actors that or employees in your business and what they do on the day-to-day. Well, how do we begin transacting? What do they do? I mean, what are they transferring, and are they transferring? Are they allowed to create that document, or are they not allowed to create that document? And these are kind of some of the questions that, the Token Taxonomy Framework is really enabling through, for example, a workshop, which, workshopping exercises, which, we can get into here in just a few. But now that we have these tokens and we've figured out a way to design them, how do we make this enterprise ready? And that's really the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance main initiative. That's why it's an enterprise member driven organization. Now, not all organizations are enterprise. Some are small businesses, some are, medium businesses, whatever the case might be, startups. But all of the participation really comes together so that we get a really amazing overview as and a collaborative overview at that, as to everybody's different perspectives and needs. Well, Microsoft Azure, Microsoft came out this past month and released in private preview. And again, Envision Blockchain has had the pleasure of participating in this preview. At this point, it's a gated preview, where Microsoft created this infrastructure called Microsoft Azure Blockchain Tokens, which literally pulls, it's a blockchain tokens infrastructure, which literally pulls token templates from the TTF, so that we're using the same token templates to deploy within the Azure infrastructure that will allow multiple different ledgers to run in a specific instance. Likewise, you can develop out multiple different application user interfaces on top of this Azure Blockchain Tokens infrastructure. And of course, we plan on, building out multiple different solutions which can leverage various different ERP solutions that either Microsoft or other third-party applications may have out there, so that we can begin using these token templates to help drive enterprise adoption. Going back to some of the design, this is the designer this is the token template designer that Microsoft has also released, which is more a question-based designer. I guess that's more like a consultative approach rather than more of a drag and drop. Both of which we feel are very interesting and easy to work with, and would be happy to get into more details with you on another call if you're interested. We have a specific workshop which I'll get into here in just a minute. But just a brief techie overview, if you will. This is you're taking a look at Postman and Swagger. So an overview of their service APIs, and of course a way that we can begin interacting with them to understand what sort of messages we should be retrieving for proper entries against those APIs, whether they're puts, gets, whatever the case may be. We can begin interacting without a user interface with the Azure Blockchain tokens infrastructure. With that in mind, enterprise standards enable enterprise adoption. And between what the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance Token Taxonomy Initiative has really set out to do, and and all of the documentation that sits alongside of all of these token templates, really enable enterprise organizations and their leadership to take a seat and say, okay, guys, we actually have standards here. We understand the specifications. Legal can be happy. Accounts can be happy, insurance can be happy, so on and so forth, knowing that these are, standardized and certified token templates, and that really helps with driving adoption. In addition to, of course, where Microsoft's position is in bringing those token template standards into the Microsoft ecosystem. Just some basic news that Envision Blockchain has been in. As mentioned before, we had the pleasure of participating in the development and build out of the EA Trusted Token. Likewise, just at the beginning, we had announced that we were, of course, part of this rollout of this version 1.0, where we were named and cited as global leaders in this specific initiative. And of course, we were quoted there on the Azure Blockchain Token's website, which we're super appreciative of all of the above, and really appreciate the opportunity to participate and collaborate within this industry. That's an emerging industry. We believe it's a big game changer for the world, and we're really happy to see that it's being done in such a methodical and concise way that the enterprise adoption can truly look at it not as just some emerging technology or that can exist or might not exist or what. It's very calculated, and there's clearly a very precise hierarchy as to how tokens are going to be defined, leveraged, and can be relied upon into the future. And if you're interested in learning more, Envision Blockchain, as a Microsoft partner, has various different consulting offers in the Azure Marketplace under the consulting services section, of which we are definitely proud to announce that the Azure Blockchain Tokens and Token Taxonomy Framework, the 2-day workshop, is now available, where we run through a series of questions and various different analysis in order to help extract different use cases, so on and so forth, to really help define these tokens for your use case and understanding the various different solution deployment diagrams, so on and so forth, so that executives can really understand and receive these token specification documents that they can review and read about and write home about, so to speak. we're really excited about all of this stuff. So if you have any questions, and I see that there are questions coming in from the crowd, please feel free to contact us. We're definitely more than happy to enter into any sort of conversation, use case analysis, and to, of course, begin introducing and further educating you as to how the world of tokens is evolving.